Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Omid Miri. I'm the chair of the committee. Just a few housekeeping points for all participants. The fire exit is towards the back in the lift lobby and down the stairs. There are no fire alarm tests scheduled for tonight, and the toilets are also in the lift lobby. Now I'll move to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, and we do have apologies from Councillor Rebecca Harvey. Moving on to item 2, declaration of interest. Do any members have declarations of interest? No? Okay, no declarations of interest. Moving on to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 5th and the 19th of December. Are the minutes of the previous meeting agreed? That can be noted, please. And that brings us to item 4, which is 160, 164 Hurlingham Road. And can I please ask Roy to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this application relates to the site at 160, 164 Hurlingham Road, involves the demolition of the existing industrial buildings and its replacement on site with 4/5-storey buildings for use in connection with a care home, 81-bed care home. There's also some other associated works, which include cycle parking, refuse storage and landscaping. As you can see from the site plan, the site is highlighted in red, the buildings contained within that site. To the north of the site is the Fulham Park Gardens Conservation Area. To the south is the Hurlingham Conservation Area, and the site itself is in the Hurlingham Conservation Area. To the north, you can see there's a viaduct, there's a railway viaduct. The site is in a PTAL area, PTAL 6A. It fronts Hurlingham Road. To the east, you've got a terrace of properties which abut the site. On the opposite side of the road, you've got what was formerly the Magnet Southern sort of commercial use. Just showing you this because it's of interest, because since the last applications were considered at appeal, the adjacent area, and the site falls just outside of this area, was designated as a clean air neighbourhood, effectively a low traffic neighbourhood. This is showing an aerial shot of like before and after, if you like. So the image on the right is the image as existing. So that you can see the industrial buildings with the ridge roofs on the site. And to the left corner, you can see the massing of what's being proposed in this particular application. You'll see that it's a 5-storey element facing the viaduct, and it steps down to 4 stories, and then there's a courtyard adjacent to the properties in Hurlingham Road. This is taking a slightly different view of the same site. So this is effectively the rear view from the viaduct. You can see the main elevation, which would be hidden largely by the viaducts, and beyond that, you can see the adjacent properties in Hurlingham Road and the Magnet site directly opposite. This is trying to show you again a sort of before and after scenario. So this is like the front elevation along Hurlingham Road with the building's single-storey sort of frontage, and the white building with the blue door at the sort of right edge is actually a building of merit. So this proposal involves a retention of that facade. Proposed image underneath basically shows what's being proposed. So you can see that it's basically a 4-storey element adjacent to the railway viaduct with a additional floor on top of that, which is set back. And then it steps down as you move towards the properties in Hurlingham Road to 4-storey with a recessive top floor. And then previously, behind the facade, which is being retained, there was a 3-storey element in the previous schemes that has been excluded from this proposal, and now would be actually form part of a courtyard. So the reason for showing this one is because this is what the scheme looks like in comparison along Hurlingham Road to the previously consented scheme that was allowed on appeal. So the current proposal is the image I just showed you with the story stepping down from 5 to 4 and then 0 in front of the facade. This is a similar sort of scenario. This is 5, 4, and then it's got the 3-story element in front of the retained facade, and that was consent that was allowed on appeal. This is a view looking west, so this is the retained facade in the foreground with the gate. And then it steps up to 3-story with the recessive setback at 4th floor, top floor, and then the 5-story adjacent to the railway bridge. There's a view looking west, so you can see it's a corner location. This access road is actually part of TfL land, so this image is illustrative. There would still be a gated entrance. So you can see on the right-hand image where there's the access to the arches, which serves the businesses that operate in the arches. And also, just for pointing out nice and early at this point, you can see there will be actually a 1.3 meter wide emergency access for the occupants of the building. This is showing the image that you'd see from the other side of the railway line. So the top image is what's proposed, but again, because of the railway viaduct, it's hidden behind, largely obscured by the railway viaduct. You can see some dotted lines for the image below. The dotted line, which is in red, is the appeal scheme that's allowed, which you can see hopefully indicates that that was slightly higher in height. There's a cross section. So if you like, you're looking from the magnet side of the road, and this is the railway viaduct looking across to the site, and you can see that it's got a basement which is raised, and the reason for it being raised is to prevent overlooking from passers by using the access road, so they can't look directly into the property. And again, the key thing here is you can see the red line denotes the previous appeal massing, which was allowed, so you can see it's within that. So starting from the left-hand side, the 5-story element is about 0.7 meters lower than that, which was allowed on appeal. And the bit in the middle is 1.75 meters lower than that, which was allowed on appeal. Yeah, this is just for illustrative purposes, showing the sorts of materials that will be used for the developments, some brick, some stone, and some cortain steel at roof level, and some stone around some of the windows. This is just trying to show the ground floor area. So the areas in salmon, if you like, are the rooms, individual rooms for occupiers. The areas on the edge, if you like, facing the viaducts are communal areas. And this has been designed specifically to try and mitigate some concerns that were raised during the consultation process about having accommodation on the service, facing the service lane at ground floor, which would have pretty poor outlook, pretty poor daylight and sunlight. So that has been reconfigured to ensure that those units are looking inward towards the courtyard. And again, I think just point out here that the green spaces on the right-hand side of this image is the courtyard, which previously, on the previous schemes, were proposing some buildings up to 3 stories high. This is a typical floor layout. So the top side is actually the side facing the railway, but really this is just what's showing here, that the way the property is laid out is that each of these individual rooms, and there are 8 of the groups in groups of 8, as it were, or up to 8, they're considered to be households. They operate in as a household. They have shared facilities, including a lounge, and there's a central kitchen area highlighted in purple. And each of these rooms has their own sort of shower or washroom facility. This is just showing the basement, where you've got all the sort of servicing in the basement. So you've got a laundry on the right-hand side, some staff room accommodation, kitchen, cycle storage, some lifts that would serve that area, and other sort of storage facilities and changing facilities. This is just showing the proposed roof plan. So you can see from this roof plan how the building actually sets back from Hurlingham Road. So that's the sort of building line from Hurlingham Road. So the four-storey building's in the foreground, but the main sort of larger element is set back from the main road largely. So it's quite a deep site. Servicing would be from the basement, there's a service lift which comes up to the ground floor, and from that ground floor on this sort of side of the development, you can provide, there'll be servicing to off-road, so not off-road, on-street for this facility. There's no off-street servicing, it's all on-street. So the concerns that we had in relation to this were the proposed development was considered to be out of keeping, excessive in scale, concerns about the quality of accommodation, concerns about daylight and sunlight, noise and disturbance, privacy. All of these matters have been addressed satisfactorily from officers' perspective. The principle is considered to be acceptable. It's the units, or the 81-bed unit would meet a local need. It would provide good quality accommodation. The scale and massing has been reduced since the appeal that was allowed. No adverse impact on the conservation area or the building of merit. There would be an acceptable impact on residential amenity in terms of outlook, daylight and sunlight, privacy and noise. In terms of transport, it's a very high transport accessibility level. It's adjacent to a low traffic neighbourhood. It's a car-free development, relying upon sustainable means of transport because it's quite close to Putney Bridge tube station, several bus routes nearby, and 40 cycle spaces. The CO2 contributions has been a bit of a challenge because of the nature of the intended occupants. So some of the targets have not been achieved. However, we have pushed back with the applicants to try and review that, and we've pushed back quite considerably. But the key things are that it's the nature of this particular use means that you can't achieve some of the targets that you might otherwise achieve for a residential development. Then there's some section 106 heads of terms. So there's jobs, employment, skills, contribution, some highway improvements for pedestrians, and stopping up of some of the vehicular accesses. It's car free, CPZ review, the contribution to that, carbon offset payment, which actually may be revised upwards because of we're looking at reviewing a local contribution. So it stands at the moment, that's an estimate. The applicants have agreed to allow 5 of the beds to be allocated to LBHF residents who are on our nominations list, and they would be entitled to a 20% discount. And there are various monitoring fees for travel plan, section 106, air quality and construction logistics plan. Officers are reminded to recommend the application for approval.
Roy, I think there are some points on the addendum you might want to go through. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just draw attention to the addendum. You've got one additional condition, condition 51, which is basically trying to secure an operational plan for more information regarding hours for staff and visitor arrangements. The others are just tweaks to just corrections to the report, and something I've referenced already, which is page 68, bullet points, where the estimate for the payment in lieu is an estimate and potentially is likely to go upwards rather than south.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I'd like to invite some speakers. There are 5 speakers speaking in support. So we have Gary Renton, Chris Benham, James Wallace, Clive Burbridge, and Barney Soanes-Cundall. And you have 5 minutes between you if you'd like to come to the mic, and however you'd like to split up that time is up to you. Thank you. If you could introduce yourselves as well before you speak. Thank you. If you just press the button with the person on it, yeah.
Okay, hear me now. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Renton, Development Director for Care Concern Group. Firstly, just like to thank you all for your time and consideration of this application. I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes to give you a short bit of a background about Care Concern Group. So our company, Care Concern Group, founded in 1991, family-run organisation. The founder is still part of that, of the operational element of Care Concern Group. About 20 years ago, he appointed his son as chief executive officer, and over those 20 years, the last 20 years, he has grown the company from initially 3 care homes to 80 care homes throughout the UK, England, and Scotland. The company has a very strong track record in site acquisition, development, and operation. We only develop our own care homes. We don't develop for other operators. The reason I tell you that is we're not in this for a quick win. Our business plan is based on the long-term operation of the care home. Care homes, I believe, become part of the community. They will receive residents from the local area, residents and family from the local area, because there is demand. We know there is demand in the local area. We'll also hopefully employ from the local area. We'll use local businesses for supplies, materials, and services such as maintenance. And that will also include construction. During the construction phase, we will obviously again use local businesses and locals for employees. The home will be quiet in operation due to its very nature, and also relatively small workforce operating on a ratio of 1 member of staff to 4 residents, so quite a small workforce. All in all, we are very confident in the viability of this scheme and the extremely high standard of care accommodation that we'll provide. And we really do hope we can receive your support. Many thanks.
Good evening. Before you is a very strong committee report which recommends planning permission should be granted. The proposed development provides 81 beds of specialist care accommodation specifically designed for dementia care. The scheme has been independently reviewed by the University of Stirling Dementia Services Development Centre, which is internationally recognised as a leader in the field for designing for dementia patients. That report confirms that the proposal has been designed to the very highest standards. The Council's design review panel said of the scheme that they were very impressed and that there was much here to commend. The development is designed to provide residents with 24/7 specialist care in their final stages of life. To be clear, this facility is for those who can no longer live at home and need care. The committee report confirms that there is need for this sort of accommodation, and our own assessment indicates that there is a significant need, identifying a shortfall of 268 beds by 2026, and that continues to increase. National policy describes the need for housing for elderly people as critical. In this context, it is important that we get your support tonight and help to address the shortfall. In terms of housing, the proposal would contribute to the equivalent of 81 homes. Year on year, the care home will continue to free up around 20 homes in the area as new residents move in. This is an area where there is demand for family homes, but there is limited supply. So increasing the supply of family homes through the release of the general housing stock should be considered a good benefit. More widely, the benefit of the scheme include that the proposal would result in a cost saving to the healthcare system of around 6.3 million per annum. We think that this is a significant benefit to consider. This is due to the residents' needs being addressed in the care home as they arise. Finally, the home would, as Gary's mentioned, would also provide around 90 jobs, primarily secured from the local area. Further jobs and economic benefit will be delivered to the borough through the construction period, and economic benefits, we think, should be given significant weight, especially given the current economic circumstances. You have a developer and an operator in the room who has a track record of delivering and operating highly successful care homes. And if you support the scheme tonight, they will be aiming to be on site as soon as possible and opening the doors within the next couple of years. Given the need for specialist accommodation and the wider benefits that the scheme can deliver, we do hope that you would approve this tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, if you'd like to take your seats. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to questions for officers. And I do have a question just to begin with, which is that the 5 affordable units, I think the report said that that's a 20% discount. So I haven't had a chance to look into, some of the other care homes that Care Concern Group run, but what exactly does that constitute? Is care, will this be a luxury care home? Will it be, even with a 20% discount, will that be affordable for Hammersmith and Fulham residents? Can you give any sort of clarification on that?
We haven't got any clarification on that. I need to say that obviously it's a commercial facility, and the discount was something that we pushed for to get agreement on. Obviously, it's a form of affordable housing, which is something that the council would be quite keen on. Applicants have agreed to that, but the detail of that would need to be worked out through the Section 106.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Councillor Carmel. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. I am concerned. I know you push the commercial thing and commercial enterprises seek to maximize their profit, but 5 out of 81, I make it about 6%. And when you consider that to our requirements for affordable housing in residential developments, that's A, appalling, and B, only 20% doesn't even scratch the surface of what we ask for, say, on socially rented properties. So, I mean, how hard did you push? Because 6% and 20% on a commercial rate doesn't sound particularly attractive to me.
At the end of the day, it's a commercial business, and our planning policy is to try and achieve accommodation which supplies the need in the area. This is targeted at that. In terms of planning policy, there's no strong policy which puts onus on the applicant to provide that accommodation. So it's it's something that we've managed to achieve through negotiation. So it's something that's welcomed and supported.
Sure. So because this doesn't doesn't fall under the classification of residential use, it doesn't need to hit any 35% or 50% target, and any affordable units that have been secured have been done through negotiation. So
that's correct.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be 0.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. And then just one other question as well. So this is a care home for people with dementia at the end of their lives. So presumably, or maybe quite severe dementia, perhaps, or people who need 24/7 care so they can't live on their own. I think if you could go back to the slide showing the 1st and 2nd floor plan, I think I saw balconies. I don't know if that's correct. Are they balconies there?
Yes, they're well, they're kind of balconies of fashion, but basically it's got if I show it on the elevation, it's actually got glazing in front of it, so it's like a winter garden rather than an exposed balcony. So yeah. And
there's no way that the window could be opened or anything like this?
No, I mean, the way the program for this particular type of accommodation is they have to maintain certain temperatures, etc. So that's why, particularly on that side of the building as well, that adjacent to the railway line, that wouldn't be the most appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Yep, Councillor Pascu-Tibure.
Thank you very much. You can tell I'm out of practice in the year. I've got a couple of questions relating to traffic impact, if I may. The first is relating to transport facilities for people working at night. I'm sure we'll agree that in this type of facility with vulnerable people who require care, often 24/7, there's going to be a degree of night working and night transport. I note also that nighttime parking stress is at saturation point already. And I think it's common sense that, there are quite a few people, if they're working at night, will not be able to rely on the bicycle or on public transport. So I was wondering how are they going to be accommodated?
So the applicant's going to provide a travel plan, which is obviously something that we would require and secure through a Section 106, which will provide details of how staff will go to the facility. Also, we've secured a contribution towards a CPZ review because the site falls into a controlled parking area, and there's no car parking on site. So the only way to get to this would be, through other means. And I appreciate that their capacity in the locality is around about 85% or thereabouts. So for that reason, we've secured a review which the applicant will contribute to for us to complete a further assessment.
Thank you very much. And if I may continue on that, does that mean that local residents will themselves be subject to review of their controlled parking?
Sorry, I mean, I think I pointed out earlier that the site itself is outside of the low traffic neighbourhood. And the residents are obviously when you go further into Hurlingham Road, that's part of the controlled climate, like low emission zone. So that wouldn't be affected. It's just the bit that's at the front by the bridge. So that's the bit in the controlled parking zone. So obviously, after a certain time of the day, you can park. So there's a review of the whole area, but during the day, you certainly can't go through that area.
But with controlled parking, that's nothing to do with the low traffic neighbourhoods.
No, but what it does, it stops running. The parking is still something they can do in the evening, yes, and it is on the cusp, but there is capacity to review that through this application.
Thank you very much. If I may continue on the point of low traffic neighbourhoods, the last thing I want to do is get into a debate about them here. But one of the things that has been seen, particularly on New Kings Road, is that the traffic there has, should we say, not got lighter recently. So it's a bit of a worry to me that, and I appreciate that it's planned for Hurlingham Road, but that the servicing and ambulance requirements are planned for taking place on the physical road itself rather than off it. Now, obviously, just because of the nature of these buildings, some of those visits and some of those users of that might come at pretty difficult times. Especially if you have gridlock on one of the main roads leading to that, how is that going to work in practice?
In terms of capacity, if you like, it's estimated that there would be 13 ambulance trips per week, and it's non-blue light rather than blue light ambulance visits. And just show the image on the plan. Sorry, just bear with me. So you can see on the screen, there's the yellow line, which denotes where the servicing would take place largely from, but in front of that, you've got a drop-off delivery zone, and those will be double yellow lines. So what it means is that it's basically preventing general parking, but for blue light ambulance and services, it is possible to actually stop there momentarily for a limited period to be able to use that space and then move on. So it doesn't affect the rest of the locality.
But to go back to what happens when, as often is the case, the New Kings Road is completely chock-a-blocker, which is, often the case when I use it. Does that mean that emergency services will basically have to go down the Hurlingham Road and go to the relevant hospitals or relevant addresses, basically using the side streets?
I mean, again, just going back to what I said before, this is envisages that it will be non-blue light, which is not the same as blue light, which is obviously for emergency services. Emergency service that could be anywhere in the borough, and that's as may be, as and when required. But certainly, it's envisaged that when we're talking about the 13, it's non-blue light, which is not emergency vehicles, so it's not the same sort of level of urgency. Yeah.
The estimate for blue light?
Well, it's within that 13, which I said 13 trips per week.
That will be blue light.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Councillor Carmel.
Thank you, Chair. First, on the question of overlooking, as you may or may not be aware, there is a red light for southbound trains as they approach Putney Bridge Station. What assessment have you made of the overlooking into the upper floor bedrooms from packed commuter trains staring in at people who are excessively vulnerable and may not have the same, shall we say, decorum as ordinary people?
So you can see that if you look at the image on the screen, the top side of that image is a bit that would be facing the viaduct. And you can see that obviously the site is such that you've got an access road, And then within that, you've got a pedestrian access for the site itself. And then once you get beyond that, most of the rooms facing the viaduct would have winter gardens. So they are enclosed, if you like, balcony areas with, it's possible to put curtains up.
But it would be under the 18-metre rule.
The 18 metres normally only applies when you're not talking about back-to-back properties or, residential fixed properties. If you're talking about, window to window, if you're talking about trains moving along a viaduct, then, that's not.
Thank you. The second point I wish to make is I merely make a point and I don't require an answer. Given the nature of the residents at this property, making them provide 46 cycle spaces for people who are suffering from various ailments seems a little excessive, but I'll move swiftly on from that. And I suspect that Councillor Harcourt will be going on the same subject as me, which is, as you referred to in your report, the CO2 levels. On a brand new build, only having 12% savings from renewables is quite frankly appalling. And I do recognise the requirements of the residents are higher than before, but there are architectural and various engineering things you can do to do that. And the overall saving is only 18%, as opposed to the absolute minimum requirement of 35%. Since the appeal decisions, I think we declared a climate emergency since that date. And I actually have difficulty, having declared a climate emergency, that this figure is, on a new build, is coming in so low. And, an offset payment's an offset payment, but whoopee wow, we're trying to be the cleanest borough in the country. And this ain't going to help. Your comments, please.
Through the chair. So obviously the London plan sets out targets and the London plan.
Councillor Carmel, if you could just let Roy finish so we can all hear, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Roy.
So these targets obviously is something that we try to achieve on every site, but it's not always possible on each site. So each site's on its merits. This particular site is non-residential site, so it has slightly different targets, slightly lower than the normal residential. And given the nature of the use, there's some quite site-specific issues which relate to this particular location. So first and foremost, I think the original targets set out in the London plan are based on building control regulations back in 2013. And if, for example, this application had come in a few years ago, probably they could have changed the gas boilers to air source heat pumps, for example, and that would have been a significant increase. So it's not that they're not trying to make the savings, it's just that the circumstances have changed because I think the baseline has changed. So previously, for example, if an application came in, there would be an expectation that you'd go from gas boilers to air source heat pumps, and then you'd obviously make that as a saving. But because now the current standards, which have been introduced in 2021 and took effect on the 1st of January 23, mean that the baseline is now air source heat pumps, you can't make the same sorts of improvements. So that's a sort of a general thing. But then specific to this type of application is that the standards for care quality that are required for this particular type of unit is such that they have considered, for example, triple glazing. And if they put triple glazing in this location, it actually results in sort of not quite overheating, but too much heat in the property for the intended residents. So that's counterintuitive to the way the type of care that they need to provide. So that means they fall short in in one method that they might be able to improve. Also, we would normally seek to have sort of passive ventilation, but because again, the nature of the particular occupiers in this property, it would have to be mechanical ventilation, which obviously uses more energy. So there are some efficiency measures which they have explored, which is not possible to achieve. However, in terms of the skin of the developments, the walls, the roofs, It's a very well insulated building when compared to building control standards. In fact, it's something between 2 and 3 times above the standard. So they achieve very good standard. And the London plan itself does recognise that not every site will achieve the target, and there is some flexibility. And I think this is one of those scenarios where we're exercising that flexibility. So officers have pushed, got additional information, and are satisfied that they've gone as far as they can.
And just to come in on that, so in the addendum, there's that point that the payment in lieu will be over £113,000 based on the London plan, but because obviously our local rate is far higher, that figure has to be updated to take our sort of rate into account. And can you give any estimates as to how much higher that final figure will be?
So the London plan figures are based on a figure that's obviously in the London plan, and more recently we have been looking at that and have come to the conclusion that that probably doesn't suffice in terms of what we want to achieve as compensation. Excuse me. So we are actually looking at a new rate for local rate to add to that figure, but we haven't actually got a detail of what that would be just yet, because that's still being calculated and still going through a process.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Harcourt, who I think wants to ask a question on this point as well.
Yes, excuse me, can't speak. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. First, yeah, I've got some points on the issue that Councillor Carmel's just been making, but I just want to be clear that the term low traffic neighbourhood is not one that is used in South Fulham. It's absolutely clear it is not a low traffic neighbourhood. Call it South Fulham traffic scheme, call it a clean air scheme, whatever you want to do. It is not a low traffic neighbourhood. So just to be clear on that. Secondly, going on, other members on this committee will recall this site having come up on a couple of occasions, this committee, and the times we spent arguing about it, what's suitable, what isn't, and so on. And we've seen, the appeals granted by the inspector. Having looked at the plans on this, I must admit they are considerably better looking than the previous ones, and it's lower, it's a better build. And so all in all, I think it's a very good result. But, and this is where it comes down to it, I do not think that 18% reduction in carbon emissions is good enough. Regardless, I've heard what Roy's had to say about this. We had exactly the same situation a few weeks ago when we discussed Shepherd's Bush Market, as I recall, where it was slightly less than that was the reduction in carbon, but exactly the same arguments hold. That was a new build. This is a new build. That was a non-commercial building. This is a non-commercial building as such. It's not non-residential, I should say, in both cases. And, if we have a council policy of net carbon zero by 2030. And if we're going to continue going down this route, giving planning permission to buildings that are not going anywhere near meeting that target, and I appreciate there's the offsetting, but that's just basically saying polluter can pay. And it's an argument I've made here on many, many occasions against, regardless of who the developer is, that I don't like the idea that simply because you can afford to pay to pollute, you should be allowed to do it. I do have a problem with this, and it really is a major problem for me personally, because I do like this development and I like the idea of the care home. It's necessary and everything else it's doing. I take the point about whether 20 rooms is adequate or not, at the better rate. But apart from that, to me, it's a real pity. And when I read in the press, and I keep in touch with all this stuff, obviously, given my other role, of new air source heat pumps, which are now capable of heating water to a much higher temperature than the previous ones where you may not need the additional support of heat and such like mechanisms. Then it starts saying to me, well, why isn't more being done to achieve a better cut in emissions? So, I do think that's a major problem, and hopefully at some stage we'll get to a situation where developers will start getting nearer to it. But this is such a long way off that 35%. If it was a bit nearer, I'd say, okay, fair enough. I take it, understand the special needs of this particular type of development, etc. But this is such a long way off. I have problems with that. And I say it's an absolute crying shame because I do like this development and I see the need for the work. And I've heard what the applicants have had to say, and I like what they've had to say as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt. Thank
Sorry,
you.
through the chair. It is a challenge. As it stands in terms of planning, we have to assess, we're under statutory obligation to assess all planning applications against the development plan. And the leading policy on this, which is more recent than our own local plan, is the London plan. So we do have to give that significant material weight. There's an acknowledgement within the London plan that currently zero carbon target is a big challenge, and therefore there isn't the evidence base to make it mandatory that non-residential or residential achieves net zero, and they do have this offset payment. The point I think we were trying to make about the percentage targets, it doesn't really reflect exactly how it's performing, and it is, if you like, misleading in that respect because of the new 2021 building regulations and where that has set the baseline to measure the carbon reduction from. So all the measures that this development is achieving through low carbon heat pumps, solar PV, energy efficiency lighting, some of these key aspects can't be taken into account and can't be put towards the percentage reduction. Therefore, it's showing, if you like, an artificially low figure. So we are mindful of that. We've discussed this with our own internal specialist colleagues on this. We have really pushed it and challenged it. And we do acknowledge that the figure is low, but it is misleading in that respect. So we will continue to push on this, but on having looked at this, robustly tested it, we felt this is as far as we could push it, and it does comply with the policy, the energy and the London Plan energy hierarchy requirements and criteria in that respect.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I accept, that as target of zero emission is very, very challenging, to put it mildly, regardless. But we've had developments come here which achieve passive house, which is 80+% reduction in carbon. So things get that way. And to say that, and while I accept that achieving 100% is exceedingly challenging, if not almost impossible at some times, 18% is a damn long way away from that, and it's barely halfway to the mayor's target of 35%. So there's a big difference there, which is the point. And regardless of anything else, you're talking about 2021 standard and baseline and such like. The passive house things that I've just mentioned, like Hartop and Lannoy and other places, they're also based on exactly that same baseline. So if it can be achieved, and I just think more needs to be done.
Just through the chair. Only point I wanted to highlight was obviously this is a particular type of accommodation for a particular type of end user. So that's one of the main reasons why it's not hitting that target. If it was a residential use, we'd be seeking all the things that you've been saying. But in this particular case, it's site specific case, there are some reasons why those can't be achieved.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harcourt, do you have anything to add?
No, I think I've made my point quite clearly on that.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to Councillor Walsh next.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to return to the matter of the CPZs. I've just been looking at the council's CPZ map, and I can see that the entirety of that area is actually covered by controlled parking zones. So I just want to understand a little bit more about the current parking situation. Firstly, obviously, is this, as is often the case around the borough, where you've got controlled parking hours and then non-residents or non-permit holders can pay to park in that area? Or is this a situation of parking permit holders only? I just want to understand the level of stress that's currently there as a way of understanding what potential solutions could be obtained from a CPZ review of that area?
Through you, Chair, the parking controls, the existing parking controls are mixed bays so that they can be used by resident permit holders and by pay and display. What we decided to do was to secure a contribution to review that arrangement so that we could increase the hours of the zone to protect residents further, because currently the hours are 9 to 5, Monday to Saturday. And potentially this use class could generate trips outside of those hours. So what we've sought is a contribution towards a review, which residents would be consulted on in terms of either extending the hours of the zone or potentially making it so it's residents only in certain areas to protect resident parking. But that would be done under consultation with residents.
And with just to understand the scope of the review, would this be the entirety of that CPZ area or just the immediate vicinity of those streets surrounding the development?
The contribution is sought towards the zone, but there is scope to amend in the immediate area if that was where the appetite was. If further beyond the application site there was no appetite to change the existing arrangement because of maybe the current controls are convenient for residents, then there is scope to maybe just to change it within the immediate area. So that would come out of the consultation.
Okay, and just to be, you may have covered this. It'd be the entire of the zone that would be part of that consultation.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Roy, if you could just go one slide down, slide 14. Did you say that the rooms in blue are staff accommodation?
So sorry, this is a typical ground floor. Well, this is the ground floor, sorry. So the rooms in salmon are the accommodation. Some of the other rooms are office areas and communal areas. And there's a cinema there as well, I think in yellow. Then when you go to this, is it ground, well, typical above ground and first floor, the salmon areas are, if you like, these households, which are 8 units or up to 8 units. And then you've got seating areas in yellow, and you've got kitchen area in purple, and then an office in the middle. And then the basement is essentially staff servicing facilities.
Okay, so there are no live-in staff. It's just done on a shift basis, but 24/7 cover.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Shortbody.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. The first is to go back on what Councillor Walsh was talking about, which is to do with the parking. So I'll start with that. The narrative throughout the report talks about comparison with other similar schemes across our great city. Obviously, you've put in the addendum that the applicant will have to provide more information about the volumes and frequency of people coming to visit residents in the house. There's about 80 beds, which suggests about 80 residents. Based on those numbers, what is your observation of similar schemes in terms of the frequency and the volume of people who visit such a scheme?
The data was based on a site in Croydon, which is not directly comparable, although it is comparable in terms of things like the delivery and servicing, the ambulance activity, But some of the travel to work, we actually use data from ward data for the census for the actual the ward where the site is located, because that was more representative of how residents would travel to work. And it also reflects the fact that this has got a better public transport accessibility level compared to the site that was used. So the data that was provided is a blend of, but based on that data, we were satisfied that there wouldn't be any significant impact.
Thank you. What p-tau rating does the site have?
Yeah.
Sorry, in the interest of the public, because that would have been recorded.
6A.
Okay, thank you. The second question I had was in relation to the carbon emission considerations. And this is a question I didn't have coming onto this committee, but I do now. This is in relation to the carbon offsetting activities. Obviously, there's a Section 106 payment in lieu of being able to offset to the level of the London plan, which you've explained has caveats in there for such similar size. But I was just wondering, so what is the life expectancy of such a building, such a scheme, such a site, and that Section 106 contribution? What does it contribute towards? And so in the long run, because what we're trying to solve is a climate emergency, but also a health emergency, in the long run, will this carbon offsetting payment help offset the life expectancy and the full package of emissions during that life expectancy? What is approximately the balance there?
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, the offset payment is to achieve zero carbon, not the 35%, to achieve zero.
Yeah, so the shortfall, if you like, between the target and the 18%, that's what is made up in the payment in lieu. So if it's, say in this case, 18%, for example, then the 82% would be the payment in lieu to achieve zero target.
Okay, thank you. Just to rephrase, maybe, does that payment enable carbon offsetting activities that will, during the entirety of the life of the scheme, continuously offset those emissions?
Sorry, through the chair, there's a certain level of percentage carbon it's not achieving on site to get to zero. So the off-site payment is to represent per tonnage that carbon reduction is not achieving on site.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, normally when you're looking at carbon emissions reductions, you'll be looking at different elements. And one part is looking at efficiencies, and then one part is looking at what method you're doing to achieve that. And I think it's a balance to be struck between those two things. And so in terms of the lifetime development, as part of this assessment, you look at there's a life carbon, I think it's called lifetime carbon assessment, which you do as part of the initial energy assessment. So yes, is in the round, yes, is the answer to your question.
Okay, so for every year of operation where this building is below energy efficiency targets, whether London Plan, LBHF, or any, the payment in lieu covers that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If I can keep going. Thank you, Chair. A further question on the same thing. The PAC talks about, not same thing actually, but the PAC talks about the planning inspectorate ruling on an appeal that was granted previously. So I was just wondering, and maybe this is one that legal might want to comment on, but what is the impact of when we look at a scheme like that in terms of our ability to potentially refuse it on the point of overdevelopment or massing, when the planning inspector just said before that actually would accept even taller and larger?
Sorry. So the planning appeal decision is a material consideration in your consideration. However, if you want to make a decision that goes against that, you're entitled to. But you need to bear in mind that your decision should be reasonable and reasoned out clearly as to why you're departing departing from the inspector's conclusion on certain matters. For example, in these two appeals, the inspector did consider the height and the area and the impact on the area. So if you're departing and the best way to explain this will be by way of an example. So if you're kind of minded to refuse it, say, for the reason that it dominates the area and the height is unacceptable, you need to bear in mind that the inspector did take into consideration a very similar height, and took the view that that was acceptable, and that the buildings in the previous application did in fact enhance the character of the area. So if you're departing, you need to set out clearly why you are departing from those conclusions, and also have in mind that should this matter go to appeal, another inspector is likely to consider or come to the same conclusion, because they would have to be consistent in their approach.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Souslis. No?
My question was exactly what Councillor
Okay.
Walsh asked.
Sure, thank you. Councillor Carmel.
Chair, thank you very much. Just on that point, can we just confirm that a planning inspector's decision on one scheme is not binding on a different planning inspector at a different one, whilst I acknowledge it is a significant material consideration. Planning committees are quite within their power for a different scheme, because no two scheme is exactly the same, to take a different position.
You're quite right. Each application has to be considered on its merits, but the point of his making was, if, and that's why I had to kind of explain by way of an example, if you're kind of ruling something out on the basis of height, you need to take into consideration what the previous inspector said. However, if you're ruling it out on for another reason, then you're entitled to do so.
Thank you. Yes, I was just taken to, there is the end of the inspector's comments contained in paragraph 4.35, which says, however, there is no doubt that because of the site's location within the conservation area and the close proximity of residential dwellings, this is a sensitive site, and you just have to weigh each one up on the merits. But if I could just go back to the questions I wanted to ask. You had a plan of the roof, the slide of the roof plan that you brought up. If I could see that again, please. And that'll inform my questioning. Showed solar panels and some green. Okay. First of all, is the yellow bit the plant room?
The yellow bit's basically where the lift would be underneath, yes.
Thank you. And it also talks about the mesh screen in the conditions. Could you just give me a little indication of what the mesh screens are for and where they're located?
So could you just refer me to which condition you're talking about? Sorry.
I think it's condition 12 off the top of my head. Let me have a look. Hang on. Testing me memory there. Could be 9.
So there's a reference to plant screen.
Shall not project above the mesh screen in 9B.
I think that's just a typo, sorry. Apologies.
A typo for what?
Yeah, that's an error. That shouldn't be saying above the mesh screen.
So there is no mesh screen?
I believe there's a mesh screen now. No.
I presume it'll be all right for the officers to amend that. And whilst we're on the subject of amendments, can I propose my standard amendment to conditions 4 and 6 that say, and not on bank holidays? I note that it was correctly done on condition 27. Just while we're on the roof plan, can you show me where the ventilation intakes on the roof, as mentioned in condition 31 are?
This isn't the best plan to show. I mean, obviously you can see the solar panels, but I can't show you very clearly where those are exactly. So not labelled.
Thank you. And then something that does concern me in the addendum is the amendment condition 48. Apart from the fact that you're deleting the fire evacuation lift, and given the nature of the residents that are going to be there, and given the fact that there's only going to be, as I think from the we heard earlier, there's only going to be one member of staff per 4 residents on duty, to delete the fire evacuation lift is something I find quite troubling. And I note that it's going to be replaced with 2 lifts, and yet you're only showing 1 lift overrun on the roof plan. So is that roof plan incorrect?
So I think that was just, again, just a correction in the report, because one paragraph, I think 4.1, I have to go back to the paragraph, but one paragraph talks about 2 lifts, and I think both the lifts are intended to be fire rated. So that's why I think it's been changed, and then the condition secures those details.
I just want to have another look at the amendment again.
So not deleting the lifts per se, it's just the terminology, because the lifts are already there.
Sorry, I don't have the addendum open at the moment. Can you remind me what the addendum says about the conditional 48? Because I must have misread it quickly, because I only get it shortly before, and I don't have a printer here. So I like paper.
Sure, I can read that for you. So yeah, so page 48, paragraph 3.29, first sentence, delete fire evacuation lift and replace with 2 lifts.
That is what I thought I read. So the 2 lifts are not fire evacuation lifts, or are we going to amend it to 2 fire evacuation lifts? Otherwise, there is no requirement for a fire evacuation lift.
Well, the way the report read, it was written as if there was only 1 lift, but actually there's 2 lifts. One of those will be fire escape lift. So it would just rephrase it to say 2 lifts rather than deleting the lifts, as it were, because the language in the report was incorrect. It only refers to 1 lift with actually 2 lifts.
So you can confirm, and the condition will be worded to say that at least one of the lifts has to be a fire evacuation lift. Because the way I read that, and I think most people around here, was that it was deleting the fire evacuation lift, which would have been a cause of some concern.
It's not doing that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
Just one moment. Yep. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Askew-Tabura, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. The service road is currently being used by quite a lot of motor engineers and MOT garages who apply their business there. That often requires lots of vehicles being left, some in a state of some non-working. What's the plan for this development to work alongside those businesses and the quite significant amount of activity that service road will see?
So on the image, you can see the access road, and you can see the boundary in red on that side of the site. And then within that, is this access, which is from the rear of the site, top of the picture of the image. This staircase is from north to south, so it's set off the boundary. And obviously, there's been consultation with colleagues in environmental protection, the satisfactory sound insulation measures in place to prevent adverse impact in terms of noise. In terms of activity, obviously that's been taken into account in terms of the insulation requirements and for the proposal, and they've been secured by condition. We received no objections from our colleagues.
2 more questions, if I may, both coming from the local councillor who I've spoken to a bit about this. The first one is on the care home provision. In conversations that she's had with the Director of Adult Social Care, who I gather has had further conversations with the Deputy Leader of the Council, Their take is that there is currently sufficient care home provision in the area. Have conversations been had with those teams?
Yeah, I mean, the report refers to the adult social care team. We consult them as part of the application. And in a sort of generic sense, the council is quite keen to encourage, people to stay in their own homes, people to stay in their homes throughout their lifetime. And that's normally the first port of call, but there's an acknowledgement, as there is in the London plan, that that's not always an option, or perhaps not the preferred option. So in terms of providing a diverse range of facilities, this is doing that, is part of the range, and the proposals have been considered by the adult social care team, and they acknowledge and accept that this is providing and meeting a demand within the borough, and they raise no objections.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And the final one, if I may, on provision 27, which is about air quality. Would it be possible to have a provision in there for a regular contact with residents, including a named point of contact, and potentially a kind of structure for updating residents on the state of play of works?
Yeah, I mean, there's a construction management plan proposed. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a condition, or no, there's condition in relation to the demolition and construction phase of the works. There's also an obligation in relation to the monitoring. But what we require with all construction logistics plans is a communication strategy, which it sets out how there'd be regular engagement, letter drops, etc., with residents during that period.
That's very helpful. Very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? No further questions. Okay, so we'll move to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that's on page 18. Councillor Chabot-Verdier, will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Harcourt?
Against.
Councillor Sislus?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel?
Against.
Excuse me, Councillor Pascu-Tibouret?
Against.
And I'll be voting for. So if I've counted correctly, that recommendation has been passed. And now we move on to recommendation 2, which is also on page 18. Councillor Chabot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Sislus?
For.
Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Carmel? For. Councillor Pascu-Tibouret? For. I also vote for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is 9 Thames Reach, 80 Rainville Road. And Roy, can I please ask you to present the next report? Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, through the chair, apologies. So this is the application for development at 9 Thames Reach on 80 Ranville Road. I draw members' attention to the addendum, which makes some changes to the report and acknowledgement of the building of merit and some late letters that were received and some more minor changes to the report itself. So the proposal involves erection of a sunroom following the removal of an observatory over part of the existing upper roof terrace. Effectively, it's a pod on the upper roof terrace, which would be replaced with a slightly larger one in the same location. There's also erection of additional floor over the lower terrace, and then there are some changes to what is a bathroom structure to improve its ventilation and the materials which have fallen into disrepair. This is a site, so you can see a site highlighted in red. It's facing the river, and you've got the river walk, and to the rear you've got Ranville Road. It falls in the Fulham Reach Conservation Area, and to the north is you've got the Crabtree Conservation Area. You've got a series of residential properties, terraces to the north on the opposite side of Ranville Road, and those tend to be where it's the end of terrace units. It's an aerial shot, so the top image is highlighting the building that's relevant. It's one of the, if you like, 3 buildings, but they're sort of paired, if you like, with links in between them. So it's the one that's to the east with a red, and then the image below is highlighting the fact that it's only in relation to the top floor or top 2 floors, because part of it is duplex. This is an image showing the site from the opposite side of the river, and you can see at this frontage it's the grey buildings. So the pair in the middle, and then the pair to the left, and the site that we're talking about is this one that's on the edge of that, which are those 2 buildings to the right. And you can see on top of that building, you've got some structures which form part of the roofscape. This is an image from Ranville Road, so it's from the rear, and you can just about see between these sort of lift structures or stair structures the circular bathroom structure that's on the roof, which is only really apparent when you see it from the other side, the opposite side of the river, and from long views. The image on the left is essentially what the works relate to. So you've got an existing pod on the right-hand side, which is an observatory, if you like, and then below that you've got this bathroom where the alterations are happening because the roof is in disrepair and it's leaking, and it's glass tiled, and so the brickwork needs repairing. And then there's a proposal to put another pod on the blank space, which is at roof level on this lower terrace. When the original proposals came in, it followed a pre-app submission, and these proposals that came with the application from officers' perspective are deemed to be unacceptable because essentially the mass and siting of it was much more prominent
So I think we're ready to start again if everyone wants to take their seats. Maybe Alan wants to come back as well, actually. Roy, if you just give it a minute. Okay, do you want to go ahead? Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so just continuing where we left off. So I was talking about the original submissions that came in with this application. Officers considered that the original submissions were not subservient. They had a kind of a rectangular style, much closer to the roof edges than what we'd seen at pre-app, where we'd actually given positive pre-app advice to the applicant. In response, the applicant heard what we said and reverted to the scheme that was considered by officers at pre-app. So there's a pod now proposed on the lower roof terrace, which has a similar shape, sort of coffee bean shape, to the one that would be on the upper roof terrace. And that's what you see in the image there. So all of this happens at roof level. So you can see the footprint of what's happening. The right-hand side is the new extension. The left-hand side is the smaller replacement pod. And in the middle, you've got this roof, which will be replaced with materials to ensure that there's no leakage to the bathroom below. That's just a cross-section. So you can see the 3 levels, if you like. The new level is the one in the middle, which is where the extension on the lower roof terrace would be. And then beyond that, you can see the replacement pod on the upper terrace, and then the other circular structure is the serves a bathroom. So we had some objections. The objections concerns dominance, being out of keeping, harm to heritage assets, noise and disturbance, potential strain on existing communal services, and other things relating to insufficient information. From our perspective, there are 2 concerns. One is residential amenity, and you can see from this image, it's 3 pictures. The one on the left shows the building in context. So you've got the building to the left, which is some distance away. And you can see in the middle image, the relationship there. There are no windows in that flank. And then you've got on the right-hand side, the block, which forms part of this triplet of buildings. There are no habitable rooms in the flank elevation. So there would be no harm in terms of either outlook or loss of privacy. And then just as a general point, in terms of the conservation area, we consider there'd be no adverse impact on the heritage of the surrounding area. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And officers are recommending approval. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. So now I'd like to invite James Kane, speaking in support. And James, whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. My name's James Kane, MRTPI planning consultant, speaking on behalf of the applicant. Let me start by talking through the milestones of this application, which will help members understand precisely what has taken place and why this application is in front of you today. The applicant entered into pre-app correspondence with your officers in the spring of 2023, and this resulted in a favourable pre-app response. This application was validated September 23. As part of the application process, we had to give notice to all other owners of the flats in this development and serve Certificate B upon them. Certificate B simply sets out a description of the development and informing the flat owners that an application is being lodged. This triggered a knee-jerk reaction from some of the neighbours, including a request for a ward councillor to call in the application. During October, further objections were received based upon the initial plans submitted. These plans deviated from the original pre-app submission, as the officers just showed. Your officer also informed us that the design of the proposal at that time was unacceptable. In November, we entered into discussions with your officers to see if there was a design solution that would overcome these concerns, and that has resulted in the amended plans in front of you tonight, with an officer recommendation for approval. The amended plans are more in line with the positive pre-app received by your officers. The original 12 objections have been reduced to 2 in the second round of consultation. Most importantly, your urban design and conservation team objected to the first scheme, but dropped their objection following the positive amendments made. This scheme has been produced by DMW Architects. The director responsible for this design, Sean Daly, is a former employee of many years of Richard Rogers. During this period, Mr. Daly worked directly with John Young, who was instrumental in the design of the Thames Reach development. Richard Rogers has a famous quote which says, "Architecture is a living thing. If I want to leave something to the future, it has to be able to change but retain the intended ethos." This is precisely the situation here. The ethos of the building is retained, but the additions proposed allow for positive change, which includes a significantly enhanced thermal performance. Mr. Daly contacted John Young, the original architect for this development, and sent in the proposed plans for this application. Mr. Young responded and had no concerns to the additions, which speaks volumes in terms of whether the proposal retains the original ethos of the development. DMW are also responsible for a very similar approval within the same block in 2020 at flat 25. Whilst it is acknowledged that the building is of high architectural value, the fact is that it isn't a listed building. I would like to thank officers for their positive engagement during the determination period of this application. I fully support the officer's report, and this document is very strong in the event that we should have to appeal, which I fully hope we don't need to. The conditions are all acceptable to the applicant, and I ask that this application be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, now we can move to questions for officers. And who would like to start with the questions? No questions? Yep, Councillor Carmel.
Yes, I'm a little unclear. I've had a look back at the planning history. When the building was originally designed by, I think, was it Mr. Young, what was the size of any footprint on the roof in square meters, or if I prefer it, square foot? I just want to see how it has increased in its iterations over the years since it was built, because members who've been on this committee for a long time know that I have a personal dislike for what I call the ratchet effect of planning application after planning application, each increasing slightly, making it very difficult for officers to turn it down. But if the sole increase in size had come in at one go, a different decision may have been made. And what is the increase in footprint on the roof by tonight's application? While you're looking it up, I'll just say that I think that the glass bathroom is an incongruous addition to the roof, and it spoils the skyline and affects people's views across the river when they're looking at what is allegedly a conservation area, and for people looking out towards the river as well. And I find, compared to the rest of the roof line of the other buildings, that this particular set of two roofs is out of keeping with the other buildings.
Okay, so obviously the two structures there at the moment, and the proposal is to replace an existing structure with a slight enlargement. The middle structure would stay exactly the same in terms of its basic size, and then there'd be additional area of about 40 square meters on the lower roof terrace. We granted planning permission, if you like, 6 rooftops for an extension in 2019, I believe it was, on the left-hand side of the leftmost building. And there's obviously a structure adjacent to that, and there's nothing in the middle. So I think, when you look at it from across the river, the opposite side, you can see that against the backdrop of the existing structures at roof level, it wouldn't necessarily be out of keeping. And we feel that it's set back sufficiently to be recessive, so it's subservient, whereas by contrast, the original submissions were not recessive, were not set back, were, from our point of view, over dominant. And so in terms of appearance, notwithstanding the footprints, it's more subservient and therefore more acceptable in this location on that building.
Yeah, I fully understand that, Mr. Secretary. What I was asking is, were those rooftop additions part of the original planning application, or have they been, what's the word I'm looking for, accreted on bit by bit? And the owner, I don't know whether it's the same owner or not, or each subsequent owner has sought to increase the footprint of what is probably the largest property already in that entire development.
There's nothing in the planning history to say that they weren't part of the original permission. I'm looking at the history here. There's nothing in the report that says any different. So we've looked through the history and can't see anything that might suggest those are not original. But if they were subsequent additions, in either case, they're still, part of the building as it is now, and in principle, they're established as part of the roofscape. So,
okay, yep, Councillor Schwartz.
Thank you. Two follow-up questions on that. And there was mention of a bathroom, but I understand it's the removal of the bathroom roof and the rooms created, not in fact bathrooms. Is that right?
Yeah. So the middle structure, which is the circular one, is actually a bathroom. So it's double height, I believe, so yeah, it's just got a very high ceiling, but that's the bathroom, so that's being retained.
Okay, thank you. And on the second point of the planning application, so we've got the history going back to 1987, which isn't very long ago, but then none of these things on the top, if they weren't part of the original design, would have come after 1987, which is...
That's correct, yeah. If they were, and there's nothing in the history to suggest that that's the case.
And Roy, you mentioned that the block on the left, planning permission was granted in 2019 for an extension, but none was built? Or are these photos just out of date?
It's expired. I think
it's expired.
Obviously, in the interim, we've had COVID, so presumably occupiers may have changed and they just didn't implement it.
Okay. And I think this view is useful because, you can see 2 pods already. I don't think, just personally, addition of a third one would really alter the view at all. Just my personal opinion. Do we have any other questions? No? Okay, then we can move to voting. Yeah, Councillor Kamal.
One very quick one. Is there an extant condition on the flat roof that says no part of the flat roof that's not currently within a structure shall be accessible, the standard one we just had on the last one? And will that require a change at all, or will granting permission for this supersede the original planning condition, should there be one that is extant?
Sorry, Councillor Kamal, what do you mean? I don't quite follow what you mean. If you could clarify.
Very often when we have flat roofs, we have a condition that says no part of the roof shall be used as amenity space to protect the et cetera. I was just wondering, with the exception of the pods that are currently there, is there a condition to that effect? And do we need to amend that from the original planning permission, or does the fact that we grant planning permission supersede, or is there a conflict? Does that make sense now? Yeah.
Through the chair, the conditions would essentially be restricting structures which would otherwise be able to be constructed or erected without planning permission. So that's what that condition does. If something requires planning permission to be built, it requires planning permission. So there is no condition that would carte blanche prevent any structure. It would just be in the event of stuff that would not otherwise require planning permission. Anything coming forward that requires planning permission would be assessed on its own individual merits, as this one is.
Sorry, the essence of the question is, if there is an extant one, do we need to amend it, or is it superseded? Because we don't want to have 2 conditions in conflict with that. So we've got one planning permission saying you can do it, and another one saying that it can't be done. I just wondered if we needed to, not again. Whether we needed to consider that as a committee, because I just want to make sure that should this be granted, that it's not, given that some of the neighbours are not happy with this, whether it would be subject to judicial review on that ground or some other ground that they came up with. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to get clarity.
There is no conflicting condition.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? No? Okay, we can move to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on recommendation 1, which is on page 71 of the report. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Harcourt.
4.
Councillor Toulouse.
4.
Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Carmel.
Not voting.
Councillor Pascal Touberay.
4.
And I'll also be voting for, so that recommendation has been approved. Now we vote on recommendation 2, which is also on page 71. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Harcourt.
4.
Councillor Toulouse.
4.
Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Carmel.
4.
Councillor Pascal Touberay.
4.
And I'll also be voting for, so that application has been approved. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 6, which is 299, 301 and 303 Munster Road. And Roy, if you could please introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for an additional floors at 3 adjacent properties, 299, 301 and 303 Munster Road. They form part of a terrace of 5 properties. So there's a site plan here showing the site highlighted in red, and you've got the terrace on either side, so kind of mid-terrace properties. This is an image of the site from street level. So you can see there's uniformity at the moment. None of those properties have a roof extension or roof addition at that upper level. This is just a view from the rear showing the properties with their various roof forms, but no additional floors on the upper floors. This is what would be proposed. So you'd have 3 additional floors adjacent to each other. Normally, if we had an application for 1 additional floor in a terrace, which is unimpaired, we would normally seek to refuse that because the vast majority of the terrace would be unimpaired. In this case, the application is for 3 additional floors, which would be the vast majority of the terrace. And ordinarily, we would support this, but we would do this through a legal agreement. The applicant has declined to enter into legal agreements, hence the reason why we are putting it forward a recommendation for refusal. So you see here the image on the top is what's proposed. You've got these 3 additional floors on the left-hand side of the terrace, and then the blank space between the remaining 2. The bottom image is a cross-section showing the depth of from front to rear, so it doesn't look across the whole of the property, but the front part of the property. Here we go. So, and this is an image from the rear. So again, just showing the additional floors at roof level, and then the properties to the left have no additional floors. Another cross section showing the sort of relationship to the floors below. Here we're trying to sort of highlight the fact that we've had appeal decisions, recent appeal decision for a property in Hammersmith and Fulham, where an applicant was seeking to do a joint venture where they put up a series of extensions at the same time. We attached a condition to that permission. That permission was challenged on appeal, and the inspector's conclusions are here, basically saying that if none of the householders have control over their neighbour's land, or a condition requiring the completion of all the extensions of single operation, or one which prevents occupation of any extension until they are completed, is not reasonably enforceable condition and should not therefore be used. He goes on to say, have no evidence before me that indicates the individual owners have any control over their neighbour's land, and no planning agreement would bind the land and successors entitled before me. So that was basically saying that conditions don't work. We then had a recent appeal decision in May last year, where the inspector was basically saying that the use of a legal agreement is appropriate. And in this particular case, again, a similar scenario, a group of additional floors. The inspector acknowledged that the proposals would provide a more uniform appearance to the appeal terrace. However, the properties are in different ownership, and he had no firm details to indicate that the owners have any control over the other land with the site outside of their ownership. Accordingly, he considered that a condition to require the works to each property were carried out would not be reasonable or enforceable. And then he goes on to say, in the absence of any legal agreement or other mechanism to properly secure the carrying out of the development as a whole, he cannot be sure that each extension would be completed. And goes on then to say about piecemeal developments and how that would be unsatisfactory. So from officer's perspective, we've come to the conclusion that this application should be refused on the basis that the applicant's not willing to enter into a legal agreement to secure the whole development in its entirety.
Okay, Roy, thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Ignacio Laracochia to speak in support of the application. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Esteemed members of the committee, my name is Ignacio and I'm the agent for this planning application, but I'm also one of the applicants and I'm very keen to move in to our new flat with my wife and our 2 young daughters soon. I would like to start by highlighting that the proposal has already been formally described as acceptable by the planning officer and received no opposition from neighbors. The only contentious point is the legal agreement. We believe such an agreement is neither fair nor on the applicants, nor necessary. Before we get into the legal agreement, I would like to point out that the report describes the existing terrace as an unimpaired and uniform group of 5. It cites precedents for dismissing an appeal referring to unaltered terrace groups. However, one of the properties in this terrace has already been extended, so it is not unaltered. This reference is therefore misleading. The report also indicates that incomplete implementation would be detrimental to the character of the terrace or the area. The planning inspectorate, however, in a similar case in Munster Road, concluded that a mansard extension would not be harmful or conflict with policy due to the presence of many similar additions in the vicinity. Applying the same reasoning, the extension of any one of the 3 properties would in itself comply with policies DC1 and DC4. To get to the point, imposing build obligations or timeframes is against government's advice. This legal agreement seeks exactly that. It would impose a build obligation within a certain time frame, indicatively 18 months, and £5,000 in council legal fees. In our view, it is not fair, not proportionate for this type of residential project, and not enforceable. They are hardly ever used. We are talking about 3 families, not a big developer. This is not Olympia, as one of the local councillors put it when we approached him for guidance. We do agree that maintaining terrace unity is important. This is why we have been working for more than a year with our neighbors on a combined planning application, agreeing to a common design. This planning application alone is proof that the terrace would keep a unified look. There is no need for a time frame either. It is in our best interest as applicants to build as soon as possible. The sooner we build, the sooner we can move in with our families, and our neighbors, the sooner they enjoy the extra space. A legal agreement is not necessary to incentivize building, but it's rather a dangerous and risky way to entangle the properties and potential damage the relationship between neighbors. Planners have formally confirmed that all 3 applicants would be liable for any breach of contract, and I quote, that the only remedy in the event of not compliance would be demolition. That would be profoundly unfair and incredibly onerous, as it could penalize an innocent party for the action or inaction of another neighbor. To conclude, we're in a huge financial and housing crisis. Fulham is a dense area where new development is complicated. These properties are maisonettes, and they are cheaper than the neighboring terrace houses. It presents a great opportunity to provide a bigger housing at a more affordable house price. The proposal is modest, reasonable, and sensitive to the existing building and area. We've worked together with the planners to achieve an acceptable proposal. We kindly request support of the application without a separate legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat, thank you so much. And if you could just turn the mic off, actually. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, now we move on to questions for officers. I'd like to start. So I just want to understand. So we have 299, 301, and 303, and 2 of these addresses have signed up to some kind of an agreement or an undertaking to build the extension, and 1 hasn't. So which number hasn't?
I believe it's the one on the corner.
On the corner.
Which is the most prominent one.
Sure. So my, sorry, we can't take, sorry. Roy, do you have any clarification on that? Is it the one on the corner? Or?
Well, I understood it would be the one on the corner that has the worst impact, but in either case, if it's not the one on the corner, the point is that there's only 2 out of the 3 people that have actually agreed to enter the agreement, and yeah, that's what we're aware of.
Sure. Okay, so then my understanding is that officers are recommending refusal because one of the extensions might not be built. Okay. So is there any existing policy that you can refer to on unimpaired terraces? Any policy that says that can't happen, or any kind of regulation or anything like that that suggests that?
No, our policies are generic, and they obviously apply across the borough, and every circumstance is different. In this particular case, what we would be trying to do, or what the policy would be trying to encourage direction on, is uniformity and the character of the area. This particular location has a very uniform character. You can see by its two-story dimensions, and the roof line is consistent. If you were to interrupt that roof line with one additional floor, that would be unacceptable, because it would, if you like, unbalance the terrace. If you were to do that with two, that would unbalance the terrace, because the vast majority would still be unimpaired. If you then come forward with three, as in this case, that would, from officer's point of view, tip the balance, because then you'd have the vast majority of the terrace being altered. And if that's done at the same time, then that maintains a sort of uniformity, albeit with a different appearance, but a more uniform terrace. So if one of those doesn't get built, it changes that balance.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying. The reason why I ask is, so there's no particular policy saying that can't happen. And I think you just outlined that it's officer's judgment that if two of the extensions were to be built, but not one, it would change the sort of look of the terrace, and that wouldn't be acceptable. And so that to me sounds like it's a sort of aesthetic judgment, or just an officer judgment. There's no policy that can be referred to that suggests that. Is that right, Matt or Roy? Either of you?
Yeah, through the chair, it would be very unusual to have specific policies around each and every kind of alterations to properties. I mean, it would just not be feasible. I mean, what we have in the local plan, which itself is a relatively high level document, which is the Bible. It's the policies in the local plan essentially are what we're required to assess stuff against, and that has very clear, very detailed policies that talk about protecting streetscape and characters of areas and visual amenity. So we feel this is a strong terrace which has a significant uniformity to it, to allow sporadic roof mansards, which are quite noticeable, effectively add another story to it, which could be one or to two of them, would be harmful, significantly harmful, and outweigh the benefits of allowing the individual the expansion to their property, for which we understand. We get the pressures in particularly in London, and how expensive it is to move and purchase larger places. As extensions are something which is of real benefit in those circumstances, but we have to get a balance between allowing individuals to expand their properties for their own personal circumstances against protecting for the wider benefit, visual amenity. I don't know, Alan, if you wanted, is there anything in particular you want to pick up on? No, but it'd be very unusual to have specific policies covering every kind of eventuality in that respect.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I understand that there's no specific policy, and that it would be unusual to have a specific policy. And the reason why I ask is so that I can understand, in the absence of a policy, why are officers recommending refusal? And I think you've covered that. And I think what just comes to mind is the building on the right there of that image, which is, I don't know if you have a slide that shows what the proposed development would be compared to that one on the right, but it seems like it would be taller, actually. Yeah, I think we see there it would be taller than what's proposed. And that's just right next door. So I struggle to see how the addition of sort of these extensions would radically alter the character of the area. But anyway, I'll open it up to anyone else. Councillor Souslis.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Just to clarify, the way you described that then is an assumption that all three will be there. It's less about the bulk and scale of all three if built out. The whole point here is that we can't secure that as part of this, and what's before members now, if approved, could mean that just one, two, or three, but just one or two could be built. So it's actually the impact on that terrace and the uniformity that would be lost.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on your last point, do I understand correctly that the neighbor at number 305 is also considering a similar application, or at least that he doesn't oppose this one based on what I see in the papers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's speculation. We haven't had an application for that property, so all we've got is before us is what's been submitted to us. We've not received an application.
Just because it says that you have two letters in support, one from someone further away and one from 305, and later on it says that one of the letters supports it in general and one wants to submit a similar application. I'm just, yeah, it's speculation, I accept that, but at least there's no objection from what I can understand from the resident at 305, the immediate neighbor. And just to clarify, following on from what the chair was just arguing, so there's no objections from officers, from what I understand, on all the other grounds, so design and visual impact, it is essentially, or neighbor amenity, it is essentially on the legal agreement or lack thereof. Is that correct?
Yeah, the mechanism for controlling the implementation of the whole development is in entirety, which if it's implemented in its entirety is acceptable, but if it's implemented in part would be deemed to be unacceptable. And if this came forward with an application for one, we would be looking at refusing. If it came through for two, we'd be refusing or recommending refusal rather. And certainly, you know, with three, we think, yes, it's acceptable, but only on the basis that a legal agreement is secured.
Sorry, just through the chair to clarify, we're not recommending refusal on the basis there's not a legal agreement in place. We're recommending refusal on the harm to visual amenity. It's clear in the recommendation. Hopefully, we can expand if it's not.
Yep, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on what Councillor Souslis was talking about there, the other letter of support identifies a similar development nearby to this. Could you identify this, or if it is known?
I couldn't identify at the moment. Obviously, from what we do is we look at every site on its merits. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at this site on its merits in this context. So, you know, there might be different scenarios. So, for example, you know, there might be scenarios where, you know, there are some extensions that are built at one end that are existing, and then somebody wants to infill the gap, and then all of a sudden you result in 4 instead of, you know, 2. But, you know, some things are historic. So I can only say that every site is different.
And could you please go to the aerial shot of the area, please? I just wanted to make an observation as more of a comment. It's just that there has been some mansarding taking place, but there does seem to be quite a variety of structures and levels to the property. So I'm struggling to see how the visual harm would occur, given that there is such a variety already present in the general area. I don't see the uniformity.
So if you look at this aerial shot, obviously this is an aerial shot and bird's eye view. No, we wouldn't normally be at that level. We don't see that, but at street level, you see it in much more realistic terms, any impact. And what you would see at street level is this. And even if you look from the rear, there's a different type of frontage. You can see, yes, there are some additions like at this one, the right-hand corner 293. You can see that I think 327 may have had some extensions done, but it's a different terrace. So what we're talking about is this particular terrace and its uniformity. You can see the one on the opposite side of the road has a uniformity about it. So does the properties next to 316. They have a uniformity about them. So that's as a result of planning policies securing that uniformity and safeguarding that visual appearance. So that's what this development would achieve. It's all built at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll come to Councillor Pascal Tibero and then I'll come to Councillor Schwarberdier. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. Two questions, if I may. The first is on uniformity. Looking at these terraces, you have 4 different finishes, 3 different sizes of windows. Number 299 from the rendering looks to be a new build or relatively new build. What actually counts as uniformity? Because, you know, I see the roofline as uniform, but I see everything else as not particularly uniform at all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, over a period of time, things change. So some of those windows may have changed. You know, you can see that the properties to the right in that terrace, they've got a uniform set of windows, and the windows on the left-hand side have a different appearance, but the proportions of those windows still have a sort of a uniform appearance, and obviously the width of some of those properties are different as well.
Thank you. And
sorry, Councillor, just to add on to that, I think the key element here is about, as you mentioned, the fact that there is a consistency in terms of the parapet datum of the two-storey development, recognising there is some variety within the elevational appearance at that level, but the introduction of the additional story beyond that obviously is the point that we're really kind of concerned about in terms of that uniformity and that scope of change, really.
thank you very much. I make the sort of gentle point that there's clearly different ways of looking at uniformity. But on a different point, what efforts have been made to get buy-in from the third neighbour, which seems to be the sticking point here?
I mean, we're only aware from what the applicant has told us that in writing to us that you know, they would like to progress it with two, and they have made an effort to secure another party, but it looks like they're reluctant to enter into any agreement, and there's no obligation. You know, but if the application has been made by the applicant, the onus is on them to secure their involvement, because the right certificates have been served.
So we don't have evidence that the third neighbour would not carry this out.
We have in writing that they have declined to enter into a legal agreement because only two of the parties are interested in progressing this.
But presumably the planning permission has been sought with the permission of the third neighbour and not against their will.
We have in writing that they have, how do I put this sensitively?
Sorry, just to clarify, the applicant does not own the other, they only own the one property, so there is no security within granted permission across all three that the others will be delivered, because that individual does not, we know through the application that they don't own it, so they could not build out the other two without the agreement of the other owners. They have not been able to secure that through a unilateral legal agreement. Therefore, we cannot give any weight to the fact that the application covers all three, because the ownership only covers one of the applicant.
Thank you.
So just to clarify that point, so, and actually, could we get some of the slides back up if we just want to refer to them? But while we're doing that, so the point is that all three consent to this application, but only two have given assurances that they will actually build once the approval, if the approval is given. Is that right?
Yeah, we cannot give any weight beyond the applicant's property, because that individual does not have the rights to go and build it on the other two properties. We would need sufficient legal security that the others, who the applicant has no ownership over, will build it out so that uniformity is retained. Otherwise, we cannot give any weight to the fact that it includes the properties outside the applicant's ownership.
Okay, Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you have access to Google Maps or Google Earth, and if perhaps we could go to that, because I'm interested in going down Monster Road onto 297, for instance, at what the buildings that are above the bathroom something centre. Oh yeah, to the, that's right, yes. My apologies, to the bathroom discount centre. Unreserved apologies. So that's to the left of your screen. And so, yeah, actually we have a similar situation on that side too. So you've got mansarded extensions clearly built on top of there. And assuming we would have gone down with the same process, we would have granted a planning permit for, is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 3. But there seems to be a gap. I appreciate the building's taller, so you can't see from the street that, yeah, the same happened to me, so don't worry. You can't do street view from there. But basically, what is the difference between that site, which has one extension built, then a gap, then two gaps, and what we're looking at today in terms of
sorry, so I think the key point, as you mentioned, councillor, is the fact that those extensions aren't readily visible from the street. Now, obviously, the difference in scale between the proposal site and this neighbouring property is quite significant. We have this quite a lot in terms of mansards, in terms of being very clear and careful to try and really look at what prominence any extensions would have. Given the fact that the host terrace is only 2-storey, this would have far more visibility than a 3-storey commercial building in wider viewpoints, and I think that's where the concern comes from in terms of realistically that kind of visual impairment if the schemes weren't to be implemented simultaneously. So that's where the difference comes from, is really that scope of intervisibility that varies between the different character of the different properties.
Okay, that's super helpful. And Roy, I was wondering if we could go back to where we're seeing what's proposed, where we have I mean, in your slide pack, that's quite all right. Because I'd like to understand which are the numbers that are wanting to go for it, and which isn't, because in my mind, a grouping of 2 mansarded extensions is all right. A mansarded extension, then a gap, then another mansarded extension is a different. Do you have that information up in a data protection compliant way? Please don't tell people's addresses, but do you have that information as to, would we see 2 mansarded extensions grouped to the left or to the middle, or a gap?
As a quick trawl through my other documents, I'll try not to share my screen.
Sorry, through the chair, I should point out that there is no unilateral attached to this application. So even if there was something written from that owner saying they would do or carry it out, we can't give any weight to that for the reasons I gave earlier. There is nothing within this permission which would give any security around that, only unilateral. So as I said, there is no unilateral attached to this application.
So I get your point on that, but in the case of an application for one property, for one applicant granted with a heads of terms for 2 others to do in order to mitigate the harm, which I, by the way, completely understand, there also is no assurance that the neighbours will have to do the works. So I'm trying to measure in terms of outcomes. We could end up not granting this and potentially end up with 1 mansard being built, or grant this and end up with 1 mansard being built anyway.
Yeah, through the chair, the legal agreement would give us a lot more security around ensuring that they're all built out. There would be requirements in there around that they neither could commence until the others, for example, advanced in terms of a building contract secured with a construction firm and so forth, and they were all in place, and we had other sufficient measures met as far as we possibly could. Nothing is ever bulletproof in these situations, but there would also be wording around enforcement measures that if one commenced and the others didn't, then they would be liable to enforce an action in terms of having to remove the works they've done. So it's not ideal. It's a flexibility that we've been prepared as officers, we feel, balancing up the risks attached to it, that it is a path that we would be prepared to take.
That's super helpful. Thank you for staying on what I'm trying to think about. So Roy, the answer to the question, actually, my question, reducing it to which is the original applicant? Is it the house in the corner?
Yeah, the original applicant is 303 Munster Road.
Would you mind showing us
yeah.
Can you show us the
Yeah, it's the one in the middle.
Okay, and the second one having consented to, I appreciate Matt's point about there isn't, but in the process that you were engaging with the applicant, which is the other number that has signaled that they would be willing to enter into the heads of terms?
I couldn't track that down, unfortunately, because I looked through the email, it just talks about a number.
Yeah, I can see people in the public, but we're
Yeah.
not allowed to ask questions of you, so sorry. So that's a key information, I think, in my.
And Roy, just to clarify, 303 is in the middle of the terrace, not the middle of the three units that we're talking about here. So the one that Councillor Chavot-Verde is talking about is the one above Nails 3J Beauty there. Yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Do you have more questions?
I know we're not allowed to take input, but visual language seems to suggest that would potentially be 301. Is that your understanding?
I mean, if that's correct, yeah. I mean, the information I have that's been sent to me just says 2 out of the 3, so I didn't know which one it was, but I know that obviously the applicant is 303, so yeah.
Thank you.
Roy, I will come to Councillor Harcourt. If you could go back to the Google Street View just for a second.
Do you want an aerial shot or?
No, just the street view from the ground, please.
I mean, when? What do you want?
Sorry, I can't see it on the.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So if you go a bit further along, the street just turning off to the right. What was the name of it? Strode Road. If you could just turn into Strode Road, or actually just where you are, turn the view to look towards Strode Road, the other way, sorry. I think there is actually a mansard that's on its own at the start of a terrace, or actually there seems to be, you know, a low story, a mansard, and then the rest of the terrace. So, and that's literally next door to the site that we're talking about now. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Obviously, that's historic. Don't have information about that one to hand, but normally that's a good example of what we try to avoid. You know, a standalone additional floor. So it could be that, you know, I don't know, but you'd have to check the records. Sometimes people build things without consent, and then we have to look at potential enforcement action. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Sure.
through the chair.
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
just to say you're quite right, councillors. I mean, you will find examples throughout the borough of isolated mansards or in pairs and sporadic in nature in some areas. I think it goes, and there may be various reasons for those. It may have been done under different policy. It may have been done without permission and so forth. It may have been there more than 4 years, so we can't take action. Or in some cases, you know, permitted development, development is allowed, but in the case of mansards, it really qualifies. I guess it just goes to emphasize the if you like, the need to protect areas where they haven't been hindered in that way. Now, if there is sufficient ones in proximity to the site, which we felt justified allowing this one, and we felt, if you like, you know, we've given up in this area, and we felt that there was enough there that was the established character, then we would give that sufficient weight. But in this case, because that particular terrace, and given its location, exposure and uniformity, is impaired at the moment, it's almost these other examples elsewhere highlight the fact and the need, certainly from our perspective in applying planning policy and guidelines, that we should be protecting this terrace.
Okay, thank you. Yep, Councillor Harcourt.
Thank you, Chair. This is perhaps more of a comment really rather than a question, because, you know, I'm sure we've just been looking at this area down here. Now, I think it's that next block down, 297 and such like, where there's a couple of mansards with the gaps between them and so on. It may well be that those are either historic, they were built under previous planning rules or whatever. And that's exactly the situation that certainly I'm sure Councillor Carmel will remember years ago. We spent ages discussing, was it Chesson Road or Archell Road, where there were a couple of front roof extensions and whether that constituted a wholly impaired terrace or not. And the same argument applies here, because the next bit of terrace is impaired. Should we therefore allow something that impairs the next bit or not? And eventually it comes down to what is effectively a judgment call, and whether or not we should protect what is left of an unimpaired terrace. It's a difficult one. It really, I think, comes down to a matter of opinion on this. So as I say, it's a comment rather than any sort of question on that. You can reply with a comment if you so wish, but.
Okay, yep, Councillor Chevalier, and then I'll come to Councillor Carmel.
Thank you, Chair. And this is maybe more a question to the legal officer, please. I'm trying to understand, this is a very short item in the agenda. This is just 9 pages, 11 pages. What are the ramifications of granting, so going potentially against the recommendation in terms of the degree of control the council will have over the works in terms of condition, construction management plan, ability to enforce at a later stage, because none of the usual stuff is in there.
So my initial concern is the application is for 3 mansards. Am I right? So you have to approve all 3 or nothing at all. You can't approve 2 and leave out 1. If so the only way you can secure all 3 would be by way of a unilateral undertaking. You can't secure it by way of a condition. So the question is, if you all take the view that the 3 month, even though planning permission has been granted for 3, but only 2 might be built out, is still acceptable. You could, again, if you want to ensure at least those 2 have a unilateral undertaking, you could delegate authority. So if the resolution is to grant, you could delegate authority to the officers to grant, subject to a unilateral undertaking, to at least secure 2 will be built at the same time. And also there will be, if you were to grant, you'd need conditions attached to it. Again, delegate authority to the officers to attach those conditions. But most importantly, you will need to come up with reasons today if you were to grant, and those reasons, you have to pass a motion, the reasons would have to be seconded, and the reasons should justify why, even though the officers think they don't, it would be harmful to the character of the area, in your view, you all don't think it would be that much of a harmful impact on the area.
That's really helpful, thank you. And in terms of the all the elements that are shared in the pack of the planning inspectorate, having previously said that fewer than three might be harmful, how does that impact us?
So at the end of the day, that is a decision for you all based on the character of the road. There might be, you all pointed out other areas in the immediate vicinity where there are mansard extensions where not every property in that terrace has a mansard. So it is a judgment call and it's a decision for you all.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. I have to say that I am deeply troubled between what is actually quite a nice terrace and the desire for new living space for a growing family. And people will remember, or at least Councillor Harcourt will, Sectrington Road, where in that case, almost the entire terrace put in for a front roof extension down in Sands End. But the difference there was they did it on individual planning applications by individual householders, which allowed for more controls over this. I would have been significantly happier if instead of one householder putting in an application for 3 properties, because as we all know, you don't actually have to own a property to put in a planning application for it. And if I understand the essence of the officer problem, is that it is quite conceivable that somebody who wants a front roof extension, which is generally against what we allow in Hammersmith and Fulham, especially on quite uniform and relatively old for Fulham terraces, that there is no control whatsoever on making sure that any other than the owner of the house, which is part of the application, will get built. I also remember we had actually going back to the big one on the end, 329 Lily Road. When they put in the application there and they built it up, if you go back to the tall one on the corner, Fulham Cross, on the plans is probably easier. That was originally a low building, and it came to planning committee back in old committee room 1, and they put in an application that included putting a mansard roof, front mansard on 325, which is above the blue thing where the minis are legally parked on the pavement at the sewing shop. But they didn't control it. And we had a long discussion, I think it was about 45 minutes, about officers saying that it would be a transition building. And there was a long discussion about having allowed one, it would just carry on along, and that the terrace deserved protection. But as I said, and we had another similar one in Lilyville Road, where there was a terrace of 5 before there was a little break. And 3 of them wanted to put in a front roof extension, and officers wanted to refuse, but there was an undertaking given, and the rules may have been different in those days, because it would have been 20 years ago. And because there was an undertaking given that was forceful enough for the officers to reconsider, that planning application went through, as did the Setrington one. But I would like some clarity on the Finlay appeal. Was that one applicant for a number of properties, or was it individual applications for individual properties? Because that is quite key. And just as a passing comment, whilst public speakers are not allowed to speak again after they've finished their things, if there is some concern over property numbers, if they just hold up hands with 9 or 7 or 5 or 1, you won't be breaking the rules. But I couldn't possibly suggest that you do that. But would it be a solution if, because as members of the committee know, I'm along with Councillor Harcourt, who has been very vociferous over the years about allowing increased space for growing families, if they were to resubmit with the individual landowners, putting in individual applications so that there could be some sort of assurance for the committee and for the officers that there would not be significant impairment to a terrace.
Sorry, I don't think I quite follow what you're asking, because the application, you need to consider the application which is before us, and we can't decide today based on something what might happen, what we might want them to do.
Sorry, let me rephrase. I don't think I've made myself clear, and I apologise. Were this application to be withdrawn and 3 fresh applications made by the householder of the 3 individual houses were to be put in, so there could be some agreement made for them, so that the committee could be sure that there would not be, the possibility is, and I don't actually believe this, that just the middle property will have the front mansard, which would break up the terrace and so forth. But were there, and perhaps officers could answer this, were you to get 3 individual applications from 3 individual householders in a row on that terrace, would you have come to a different decision?
Through the chair, no, because we'd have no security that all 3 would implement their permissions. So it is preferable to have one application covering all of them, but with a legal agreement, which is what we sought with this application.
But what if I understood legal correctly, if you had 3 applications from 3 individual householders, you could have 3 unilateral undertakings from the 3 householders because they have a tie to the land.
So I think the point the officers were making was if you had 3 individual applications, they would still want all 3 applicants to build it out at the same time. And if it was 3 separate applications, there wouldn't be, and one person didn't want to enter into a unilateral undertaking, we'll have the same problem as we're facing today.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being very dense. It must be the new year, dry January that's causing my befuddlement. If you had 3 applications with 3 unilateral undertakings, would you have come, or would you be likely, if you had 3 applications with 3 unilateral undertakings, linked unilateral undertakings, because you can't do a unilateral undertaking unless you have an interest in the land, would it be likely that you would have come to a different recommendation?
Through the chair, it wouldn't really work that way. I mean, if an individual application and the applicant submit the unilateral undertaking, it would be solely related to that application. So I'm not quite sure how that would work. It would work far better as one application, as the applicant has done. And I think they were responding to our desire to ensure all of them were completed as one. But as we've said, it would need a unilateral undertaking to ensure that there was sufficient comfort that the other owners who were not party to the application and the applicant didn't own would carry out the development.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get my head around this. I'm losing track of this now. As I understand the position, you cannot have a unilateral undertaking for this application because there is only one applicant with locus to one property. And he cannot give a unilateral undertaking for the other properties because he has no interest in the property.
My understanding is that only 2 of the owners are willing to enter into a unilateral undertaking. The third owner is not. Yeah, the third owner has refused to enter into a unilateral undertaking.
I'm sorry, I missed something. Have 2 agreed to do a unilateral undertaking?
Yes.
Thank you. And those are the numbers, because if they're together, then that is 301 and 303. Sorry, I didn't hear that or see that. 301 and 303. Let me have another look at the plans.
Chair.
Yes, Rory, go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to answer one of the questions that Councillor Carmel had.
Yeah, go ahead.
Referred to the Finlay Street one, and that was for a group of roof extensions being done at the same time, and one applicant, and they served certificate B on the others. And in that scenario, this is the same scenario we've got before us now. This is what the inspector was concluding, that in the absence of any legal agreement or other mechanisms to properly secure the carrying out developments, I cannot be sure that each extension would be completed. So that's in the report.
Yeah, that is what I understood, but the Finlay one was a longer thing. And if we got 2 out of 5, the question it boils down to is, could you say that 2 out of 5, and especially if they're next to each other, and then you get some transition, could that be classed as a significant impairment? Because the word significant is going to be a matter of choice. And I was coming to the conclusion that I like this terrace and I walk past it very often because I live 2 streets down, that I was reluctantly going to have to vote against. But if there are 2, they're next to each other out of a set of 5, I will be voting in favour of this.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Schwartz-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. So we've gone a bit off piece there. So we've established the numbers of 1 and 3, and the legal officer has said to us just before that we would be able to approve this on the condition of delegating to officers the signature of a head of terms with 2 of the houses, which are now together, and we could delegate conditions as well. So this would be acceptable to me, which I think is where you were trying to get to. 2 of those together, we can take the view as a committee that, so if that's an amendment, I'm not sure, but
Sorry, you'd have to first vote on the officer's recommendation, and then if you were minded to pass a resolution to grant, subject to authority being delegated to the officers to enter into unilateral and include conditions, you'd have to pass a motion. It has to be seconded, and you take a vote on that.
do I need to propose that motion now?
You can propose that motion now, but I think it would be best to vote on the officer's recommendation first and then take it from there.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions? No further comments or questions? Yes, Roy, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. It's obviously at the moment the description is for 3 units or 3 additions. So the description would have to change. Otherwise, I don't know how you talk
No,
about
the
2.
description cannot change because the application is for 3, and that's what you need to determine. You can't
That's
do.
Point. Yeah.
Surely we can say that as part of the unilateral undertaking, that a minimum of 2 would be sufficient because we consider that to be a significant impairment of the terrace. The third one has a permission which they can implement in the next 3 years, or would, just out of interest, if we grant for 3 and 2, and the permission gets started on 2 of them, does the third one last in perpetuity? I believe it does.
Yes, it would. Yes.
And so if so we vote on this scheme either way, and that's for three sort of 3 factors in the development. And then if we add Councillor Schwartz-Verdier's condition, so they're covered by all the usual conditions, whether or not the third one gets built, they're all covered by that.
Yes, yes. So your I don't think Councillor Schwartz-Verdier said it was going to add a condition. You'll be delegating authority to the officers to add the conditions and ensure that the unilateral was in place before planning permission is granted.
Sure, and that's all the usual conditions, construction management plan, and all the kind of normal.
Yes, you'll be delegating authority to them.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, Councillor Schwartz-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. But just to clarify, if we reject the officer recommendation, if we approve the officer recommendation, which is to reject, no, I'm going in the wrong way. We need to pass that resolution to make sure that the conditions are applied to the construction. So we need to, if we want sufficient control, as the Chair has just said, we need to approve the recommendation to reject, but then pass a motion.
So what you would do is vote on the officer's recommendation, which is for refusal first. And if that is rejected, that means you then pass a motion to grant.
Reject the resolution, reject the recommendation.
No, then you pass a motion on to planning permission, subject to the conditions and the unilateral undertaking.
So first we would vote on the officer's recommendation. If we vote to reject the officer's recommendation and approve the scheme, then we would vote on Councillor Schwartz-Verdier's proposed, sort of conditions that the officers would deal with under delegated authority, and then we would vote on our reasons for refusal.
You could, yes, no, so you'll start off with voting on the officer's recommendation for refusal. You're unanimous or not, but it's carried a majority vote to go against officer's recommendation for refusal. That means the refusal is rejected. You then pass a motion to grant, and that motion would be to a resolution to grant planning permission, but delegated to officers to grant the permission subject to the conditions and completing a unilateral undertaking for at least 2 of the units or 2 adjoining units being secured, and so that they're built at the same time, because you all think it would be, if you all think it's going to be less harmful to the area. And the conditions will be, you'll be delegating authority to the officers to attach the conditions.
Yeah, if I can just try and be helpful, rather than going through the complicated route of delegating to officers, we can pass the resolution to reject this and to grant permission with the conditions coming back to this committee on the 16th of February. It's not a long time away. And if we do it at the next meeting, we can just rubber stamp it and we have oversight of it. I think I know which way this is going. It's just, we just have it in writing and it just crosses I's and dots T's. Would that be simpler rather than delegating a whole raft of conditions and acceptance of the unilateral undertaking and so on and so forth? I'm sorry to give you work having to write a report and this and that and the other. I just want to make sure that this goes through and there aren't any problems further down the line.
I take your point, Councillor Carmel, but I think, I don't know if this is what you mean, but we would consider it at the next meeting just so it's all there in writing and it's all sort of very clear and concrete. But I think I trust officers to deal with that under delegated authority without it coming back to the next committee meeting. I don't know if that's exactly what you mean. You just want it clear in writing.
No, it's just that this is because of the unilateral undertakings and so forth and this and that and the other and the wording about 2 of the 3 and this and that and the other. I just wanted to make sure that everything was fine and dandy. I mean, I have no problems. I too trust officers. I mean, I remember back in the days when we used to overturn officer recommendations. We used to leave the officers to come up with the reasons why we were doing it based on the conversations we had, rather than spend 45 minutes going through and speaking out individually. But I mean, that's a time pass. I was just trying to be helpful.
I suppose what you could do is delegate it to the officers, but subject to them bringing it back to the chair or in consultation with the chair to grant the planning permission subject to the conditions. So they bring it back to the chair.
And would that have to be done at the committee, or
it doesn't have to be done
by email or anything? Yeah. Okay.
Standing orders already, condition 2 of resolution 2 on ours allows you to have well, it says minor amendments, and this is slightly more than a minor amendment, but I'm prepared to stretch it that far.
Sure. Okay, that's clear. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? No? Okay, so then we will move on to voting. So first we'll vote on recommendation 1 in the report, which is on page 87. And just to remind everyone, the recommendation on page 87 is that the committee resolve that the Director of Planning and Property be authorised to refuse permission for the following reasons, and that's all on page 87. Councillor Chavot-Verdier, will you be voting for, against, or not voting on the officer's recommendation?
I am voting against the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Harcourt?
I'm voting for the recommendation.
Councillor Sisters?
Against.
Councillor Walsh?
Against.
Councillor Carmel?
Against.
Councillor Pascu-Tagore?
Against.
And I'll also be voting against. So that recommendation has been refused. Okay. So now we need to pass a resolution to approve the application now. Is that correct? Just a moment.
Resolution to grant.
Okay, so now we move to a period of discussion where we just want to clarify the reasons that we voted against the officer recommendation. So this will be an open discussion and then we'll compile the reasons at the end and vote on them individually. So who'd like to begin? Reasons for voting against? Yeah, Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm proposing a motion to approve on the basis that the households that are willing to enter into a heads of terms agreement are numbers.
Sorry, carry on.
The two households willing to enter into 1 and 3, which groups the mansarding of the terrace, which to me wouldn't do demonstrable harm to the character of the terraced buildings, because that would be grouped. And with the heads of terms, we would have the legal assurance backed with enforcement powers that the two would in fact be built. So we wouldn't end up with just one.
Okay, so I've got that down as the two that we can be certain will be built are grouped together. So this reduces visual amenity. I have that down as one reason. Yeah, Councillor Seuss, did you know? No, Councillor Walsh, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it largely is to repeat the same thing to say, I disagree with officers. I don't think there is the same sense of uniformity that they believe to be there. I don't think this creates demonstrable harm to the area. And I think the effort by the applicant here was to put forward an application to create a sense of unity in terms of, or uniformity by putting it in together. And I think there is very little reason why this should have been refused.
Okay, thank you. So I have your reason as there's no existing uniformity to speak of, and that's an officer judgment that you
Yeah, I disagree with that judgment.
Disagree with that judgment. Okay, Councillor Pascoe-Tibere.
Thank you. I would add that this is in an area where varying roof heights and small scale mansard developments are commonplace.
Okay, we have varying roof heights. Yes, Councillor Chabot-Verdier. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to back that up, actually, with a hard fact that numbers 297 through 287, which is just across the road, have that, gapping of mansarding, etc. So it's right to say that this is an area with very sort of scattered mansarding and gaps, etc. So
yeah. So there's a precedent already in the area. Yeah. And I think I would say, I don't think there's any particular visual amenity to the area existing. I don't think there's any particular aesthetic quality. I know these things are down to personal judgment, but I think the weight that's added to the sort of visual quality of that terrace versus the need for increased housing space is far too much. So I don't know if that can be taken as a reason. It's more of a personal opinion, but I don't think there's any existing aesthetic quality, or at least I don't think the existing aesthetic quality is enough to cancel out the need for additional housing space. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, and to also add that as you're delegating authority to the officers to grant planning permission subject to the unilateral undertaking being completed, you need to also delegate authority to them to refuse if that unilateral undertaking is not completed. And I suppose you could provide, say, within 6 months, you can provide a period for entering the unilateral undertakings.
Okay, so just to clarify, that is a unilateral undertaking for 2,
yes,
not for 3.
At least 2.
At least two. Okay. Were there any other reasons, Jack? Councillor Cromwell?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Whilst taking cognizance of the extremely well-written and cogent reasons put forward by the officers, on balance, having considered all of the factors involved, and bearing in mind that it is not in a conservation area, bearing in mind the short length of the terrace, and again, bearing in mind, as others have said, the ununiform height along Munster Road and indeed the beginning of Strode Road, taking into account as well the distance to the nearest designated heritage asset, and so forth, that whilst we note that the application is for 3 properties, we as a committee have taken the decision on balance, having considered all of the evidence that has been put forward to us tonight, that the a unilateral undertaking and the building of two of the proposed 3 mansard roof extensions mentioned in the application before us tonight would constitute a significant impairment of the terrace, and therefore, whilst we do seek to protect terraces, in this instance, we believe, given the location and the length of the terrace, that 40% would be a significant impairment, therefore allowing us, in our own opinion, on and balancing up all of the factors before us, that this application should be granted.
Okay, thank you. So I think now we will vote on those reasons that have just been given. Unless anyone objects, I think we can vote on them all as one, rather than going through individually. So on the reasons for our refusal, which have just been outlined, and we can go through them again if anyone needs, but I think everyone heard them clearly and remembers them, unless anyone wants me to repeat them. No? Okay, on the reasons for refusal, Councillor Chabot-Verdier, for, against, or not voting? For. Councillor Harcourt.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, that's.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, so the reasons, I mean, ideally, if you could read it out again so that everyone's clear, maybe briefly and allowing officers to expand, and then somebody has, because that was just a motion, someone has to second it, and then you will take a vote on that.
And we're voting on reasons for refusal before.
Yeah, we've already voted on the reasons, on the refusal, and it has been refused. And now it's a motion to grant, setting out the reasons why you want to grant this, so, notwithstanding the refusal, and delegating authority to the officers to grant. So the resolution is delegating authority to the officers to grant, subject to the completion of a unilateral undertaking for at least 2 units. And if it's not completed, if the unilateral undertaking is not completed within a set period, then delegating authority to the officers to refuse the planning permission. But as part of the motion, if you could just set out briefly the reasons why you think planning permission should be granted in this instance.
Surely we should set out the reasons for granting first, and then when we've heard and weighed up the reasons, we then grant on the motion to approve.
Yes, I think that's what the chair is going to do now.
Yeah. Okay, right. So first voting on the reasons. So what we had is that 2 of the units will be grouped together. So that this reduces, well, this was the reason that Councillor Chabot-Verdier gave and everyone agreed with. Only 2 of the 3, sorry, at least 2 of the 3 will be grouped together. This was Councillor Chabot-Verdier's. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. So what we've what we found out from tonight is that the numbers are 301 and 303, which are next door to each other. So that seeks to grant to just those 2.
I understand that, but we're then hamstringing them that it has to be those 3, because if it's the one on the end, then the permission fails. So if we say any 2 of the 3 will cause significant impairment of the terrace, it allows the development to go ahead. If you're putting the extra conditions by saying that at least 2 of the 3, and it has to be 2 that are together, you're hamstringing the proposed development. The thing is, would 2 of the 3 be a significant impairment of the terrace, thereby allowing us to grant it to go forth? I'm just trying to make it easier for the applicant. I mean, we can put it that way. I don't know if you'd be happy. Would he prefer any 2 of the 3 or 2 together? He doesn't mind. I withdraw.
This is my basis for rejection of the recommendation was on the basis that they would be grouped together, and so the harm's mitigated by not having a gap. So that's why I still proposed in that motion.
Yeah, sure. And Councillor Carmel's withdrawn his.
In that case, that we should rephrase it ever so slightly, and at least 2 of the 3 extensions should be together. Yes, 2 adjoin. At least 2 of the minimum of 2 extensions should be adjoining.
Okay, I don't want to muddle up any further by rephrasing that, so we'll just go with that phrasing. Councillor Chabot-Verdier. No, we're going individually, voting on each individual reason. Yeah, sorry. Can we take them all as one?
Sorry, we can, but so just so that I get it clear.
Yeah.
What we're saying now is the reasons for approving this. First reason is that subject to a unilateral undertaking that will secure at least 2 adjoining terraces being built out, in your view, there would not be a significant impairment or a demonstrable harm to the area. And then the second one was, I think, what the one that Councillor Carmel said, this is not in a conservation area. Not in a conservation.
Okay, and the next one we had from Councillor Walsh was there's no existing uniformity, or the question of uniformity is a matter of judgment, I think, as Councillor Pascal spoke to as well.
I'm a bit concerned about that reason, because I think the officers said there was uniformity in that area. So I'd be reluctant to recommend that or say that reason was acceptable, and you all might want to rethink that reason.
Do officers want to add anything to that? Do they agree with?
Yeah, I think it was more particular that the terrace itself had a strong uniformity. We acknowledged that in the wider area, there are examples of mansarde or roof extensions, which are not comprehensive across adjoining terraces.
Sure, so it was a height uniformity, really, is what the officers were saying.
Whoops. This particular terrace, the uniformity is strong, and because of its location, the street steam was the primary reason we were looking to protect it from sporadic or individual mansardes. We acknowledge in the wider area there are examples of individual mansardes in terraces.
Sure, and just to clarify, with this terrace, when you say uniformity, you mean height uniformity, the uniformity of the height of the terrace.
Yeah, the appearance, the overall height, the appearance, yeah.
Okay, well, the only reason why I asked that is because we can see the height is uniform, but some of the members of the committee made the point that the appearance actually isn't uniform, or that's just a matter of opinion. I don't know if Councillor Pascal wants to just clarify if that's what he meant.
That's absolutely what I meant.
And I think that's what Councillor Walsh meant as well.
I concur.
So, legal, I mean, does that make sense?
I think I'd be guided by officers on that. I'd be inclined to just stick with the 2 reasons.
Okay. What about significant? 40% being, in our opinion, significant impairment. I think that's quite a strong reason.
Oh, could you just read that out again? Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Notwithstanding the cogent arguments put forward by officers and the practice of this borough not to allow front extensions unless the terrace is significantly impaired, having weighed all the factors put before us tonight, the committee was of a decision that a 40% impairment on a short terrace was sufficiently large to qualify as a significant impairment of the terrace, and therefore we decided that the application should be granted.
Sorry, was not a significant impairment.
No, was a significant impairment, and therefore was not a reason why the application, the officer application should be granted.
Oh, so that we disagreed that
Yes.
was, right,
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, is everyone clear on that, yeah?
Sorry,
sorry.
I'm not clear. On
Okay,
that.
so I think what Councillor Carmel,
I'm not
No.
clear on that yet.
let me just
Sorry.
paraphrase Councillor Carmel. Let me just see if I understand as well. So one of the reasons that we've gone against the officer's recommendation is because we disagree that 40% constitutes a visual impairment.
No, other way around. We took the view that 40% did, if 40% was built out, it would constitute a significant impairment and therefore should be allowed under our practice. Because you don't allow front extensions unless there is a significant impairment to the terrace. And the question is, officers took the view that a significant impairment was 50% of the terrace, constituted a significant impairment. And I'm saying that this committee took the view, given the short nature of the terrace, that 40% constituted a significant impairment, and therefore we were empowered to use our discretion and grant. Does that make sense yet?
Are we using impairment as a positive term here?
Yes, because.
Right, okay, I think that's the confusion here, that, yeah. Sorry,
Mr. Butler, did it make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it may confuse. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Carmel. I think it probably causes a bit of confusion to approach it from that angle. I'd be inclined to talk about the fact, or put it in a more positive spin, that, or way that at least 2 mansard extensions would provide sufficient uniformity or harmony, however you want to put it, but 2 mansard roofs would avoid significant visual harm to the terrace.
That is the first reason.
I felt that was sufficient, really.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
it didn't need to go beyond that.
I think if that's covered there, then we can move on.
Okay.
Another reason that was given was the varying roof heights in the general vicinity, which we didn't do. It's sort of, you know, in Strode Road and sort of in the general area. I don't know if that's acceptable. Yeah.
Again, that is something that the officers should guide you on.
I mean, I understand.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, it's true. Oh, Alan might put it better than me.
I mean, I completely understand the legal officer's opinion on the 2 reasons given so far. I think if we go beyond that, we are in a position where we are potentially giving ourselves due cause for subsequent applications to kind of, you know, to cause ourselves some issue in terms of how we consider those. I think, as Councillor Carmel mentioned, the fact that this isn't in a conservation area and isn't in close proximity to a designated heritage asset, I think is a strong reason to understand why we aren't, you know, taking that view in terms of harm. And in terms of the first reason, that, you know, is quite helpful to understand the position in terms of the character of the area and that visual impact, really. So I think my view would be that those 2 reasons are strong enough to understand the reason for the committee overturning the recommendation.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I formally proposed.
I think Councillor Schwartz-Verdier already proposed, but if you'd like to second.
We hadn't had them yet, so we couldn't propose them, but never mind. I'll formally second that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll vote on those 2 reasons, plus, correct me legal if I don't get the wording on this right, empowering the officers to you know, formalize the unilateral undertaking, and also delegating authority to them to attach all the usual conditions.
And if the unilateral undertaking is not completed, delegating authority
Right.
to the officers to refuse.
And yeah,
And you could specify a period within which the unilateral undertaking should be completed.
sure.
I would suggest 6 months should be fine.
Legal would suggest 6 months. Okay, so is everyone clear on what we're voting on? Yeah, okay. Councillor Schwartz-Verdier, do you vote for, against, or not voting?
For.
Councillor Harcourt.
Against.
Councillor Sisters.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Carmel.
For.
Councillor Pascal-Touberay.
For.
And I also vote for. So that has been approved.
Standard
Yeah, and now we'll
recommendation.
vote on recommendation 2, the standard recommendations. Sorry.
Too, but because you'd say again, delegate authority to the officers to make any changes this thing or to improve on the reasons.
Okay, you can do it to the assistant head of legal services or whatever.
The officers and in consultation with the Assistant Director of Legal Services to make any changes to the reasons or with the conditions.
Okay, okay, so let me just read it out just to be safe. So recommendation 2, that we delegate authority to the officers. No?
Sorry, sorry,
Okay.
Chair, because normally the recommendation 2 will be to vary conditions and obligations that are already set out in this report. But as we are delegating authority to the officers, that wouldn't be necessary. All you would be doing is delegating authority to the officers to improve on the reasons. You all have given the reasons, but to tidy up the wording in effect.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on. Okay, Councillor Chevaux-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Harcourt.
Against.
Councillor Souslis.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Carmel. For. Councillor Pascal Tibure.
For.
And I also vote for. So I believe that brings us to the end. And that's what do we have to do now? Just one moment.
Yes, just just adding in that, it'll be subject to your, yeah. So the record, yeah,
So all of that will be subject to
yeah,
my final.
your final approval. Delegating authority.
And then the
So the delegation to the officers will be subject to your, subject to consultation with you.
Okay, and that will be subject to final consultation with the chair. And so I believe that brings us to the end and the application.
Vote on it.
Oh, we need to vote on it. Okay, Councillor Chevaux-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Harcourt.
Sorry, I'm lost as to
So
what.
this is just
minor
me
amendments in consultation with the
providing
chair.
final
That's the old
approval for any.
condition 2.
Sorry, Councillor Palmer. Me providing any final approval for any changes that the officers suggest or want to make, minor variations. The chair is to be consulted.
Okay, for.
Councillor Souslis.
For.
Councillor Walsh.
For.
Councillor Carmel.
For.
Councillor Pascal Tibure.
For.
And I also vote for. So that finally brings us to the end and the application has been approved. Congratulations. Thank you.